DeSoto respected Casqui, and Casqui respected DeSoto on the war front, and they bonded immediately and started discussing, different things about being a leader and how to rule a society. So Casqui explained to DeSoto that they had been in a multi-year drought, that most of their food stores were gone or dwindling. Some of the villages under his control, of which there were several, well over a dozen, were completely out of food. And as a leader, it was difficult for him to advise his people what to do, and he was really struggling with it. They had prayed, they had sent hunters out even further to try to find meat, but of course, if it's not raining at home and your corn is foundering, the deer also don't have anything to eat, and they're going to go elsewhere. So he was in a real dilemma. Once he started talking to DeSoto about these problems that were happening, DeSoto had priests with him on the trip. He had about 12, and they were very prominent because this was absolutely a Catholic mission. And even though the Spanish were looking for things like gold and resources that they could definitely bring back to Spain to increase her wealth, they were also looking to convert and to Christianize other societies across the world. So the 12 priests and DeSoto start to proselytize to Casqui and said, I have a God that can make it rain. My God does miracles all the time. Like, you should really look into my God. He's a cool guy. We can tell you about him. And Casqui said, I believe you've been sent from heaven. I can't figure out any other reason why you're here. So I have the time. Tell me about your God and this Jesus that you talk about. So again, through translators, they start telling Casqui about the different miracles that Jesus had performed and about salvation and what this would mean for his people. Casqui brings up out of his group 2 people who are blind. He sends for them and brings them up to the priest and says, okay, you make it rain and you make these 2 guys see. We'll all be Christians right now. It's a lot of pressure to put on any kind of a preacher or a priest, just spur of the moment. Please, cure these blind guys. And obviously these priests were not Jesus incarnate. They were just priests. So DeSoto did explain to Casqui that it doesn't always work that way. We can't just, blink and make things happen. Our God doesn't work that way. But what we can do is we can have a mass, which is a Catholic church service, and we'll erect this big cross, which is the symbol of our religion. We'll pray to our God on your behalf. We'll see what we can do. Casqui agrees. So they cut down a huge bald cypress tree, and right there on the top of the mound in the village of Casqui, where the chief lived, they erected this huge thing. And archaeological evidence, incidentally, still shows the remains of that. National Geographic actually did a carbon date testing on it and a tree ring analysis just a couple years ago, and it comes back to when the DeSoto expedition was at Parkin. So it's fascinating scientific evidence to go with the historic. But I digress. So they erect this huge cross in the mound. The 12 priests lead a thrilling mass, which incidentally is the first Christian service west of the Mississippi in the Americas. And the very next day, it rained. Casqui converted. He had everyone in the village to be Christians now. Now, do we really think that they knew exactly what that meant? Well, heck no. We start kids out in Sunday school, teaching them the ins and outs of religion and what you have to do to actually let Jesus be in your heart and to be saved. All of those things didn't happen, but you know what? Their God made it rain. We're Christian now. That's what Casqui said. He started learning. The priests were just steadily inundating him with the different things that God and Jesus could do, the different ways that he could be a better Christian. And as he listens to this, he's a smart guy. He's a very smart guy. He starts realizing that there's something else that this Christian God can do for him that he has not been able to do for himself, and that is get revenge. Casqui, who was learning all the different things that a good Christian should do and be, went up to the priests and said, priests, now that I'm a Christian and I understand the way things are, I feel really, really bad about how I've acted all these years. I have this enemy named Pikaha. Have you met him? No, we haven't met him, but we did meet some of his people. Yeah, he's just a kid. He's, 16, 18 years old, and it's really not his fault, all the things that happened in the past. And, I've sent people over there. I've done despicable things, at which point the priests kind of look at him and say, like the severed heads you have on the poles all around the village. Yeah, I feel bad about that. I didn't used to, but now that I'm a Christian, I feel like maybe I should go apologize. And, as long as I repent my sins and apologize, then Jesus forgives me, right? And they said, oh, yes, that's how it works. Yes, absolutely. We're so proud of you and your growth with Christ. He says, yes, okay. How about this? I feel like it would be better received if you and maybe some of your horses and metal and swords and things, would take me and all of my warriors over there so we can personally apologize to Pakaha for all the things that we did in the past. Would you be willing to do that? So DeSoto and the priests are like, absolutely, this is great. Look at this progress we're making. And so they load up all of the warriors. But as we discussed earlier, when you're going to make peace or do anything politically, power-wise, you don't take the warriors, you take the women. Just like when he met DeSoto the first time, he took his mom, his sisters. This time he's taking all of his warriors, and they all happen to be wearing red paint. Doesn't occur to DeSoto because he's so proud of this new Christian convert he's got, and off they go marching to Pakaha. Well, when they come into the area that is the Pakaha region, which is north of modern-day West Memphis and Marion, the Pakaha people who are there just, working in the fields and making pottery and doing peaceful little things, they look up and they see, of course, DeSoto on horses. There were no horses in America. These horses had bright silver, shiny armor. There was no silver in America, no kind of metal like that. And then they see behind him hundreds of Casqui warriors who are in full war paint and are running into town. The sight of this has the Pakaha tribe run and bail off in the Mississippi. And if you're not super familiar with the Mississippi, if you step off into it like around West Memphis or Marion, you're going to be in New Orleans in just a few hours. It moves pretty fast. It's very dangerous. Many of them drowned. Others were murdered while they were running in a panic all through town. The Casqui warriors that weren't killing people were running into their holy places and desecrating them, looting all of their goods and burning things to the ground. Meanwhile, DeSoto and his guys are just shocked. What is happening? They're watching it unfold. They don't even act. They can't believe what they're seeing. We were supposed to be apologizing. We trusted you. So they're running around like mad, trying to round up the Casqui people and say, the Pakaha people, don't run, we come in peace. And Pakaha's like, yeah, right. And so Casqui, after they've done all these terrible things, they go running back to town, giggling all over themselves about what they've accomplished. DeSoto hangs out. They go to get the chief. This is a big deal. The chief is not happy. Like I said earlier, Chief Pakaha is 16, 18 years old. He's not quite a sub-adult. He's almost an adult, but he has heard stories his entire life about Casqui, this 40-something-year-old guy with axe marks on his face that's fierce, that, don't ever venture too close to Casqui land because they'll cut your head off and put it on a spike. Like, he was a horribly fierce guy, and the respect and the difference in age and just the fear had kept Pakaha from ever going inside Casqui territory to, make any attempt to militarily or otherwise get rid of the threat. So even though they'd been at war all these times, for generations, it had been Casqui leading the surge. So what Pakaha heard after this horrible attack on his village is the number of warriors that Casqui had, which he was looking around at the number of warriors he had and realized he outnumbered him about 10-1. And he started thinking, respect and fear will only get you so far. Now that I know what your numbers are, I'm coming for you. And he was also similarly very unhappy, obviously, with DeSoto because he felt like he was in on it. DeSoto is nothing but apologetic because he also sees the numbers. He's been wiped out. Like, a third of his numbers were killed in Mississippi. So he's not in the mood to have all of these things happen. And it's sheer... it's like Bug's Life. I bring everything back to Disney and Bug's Life, which that's probably not appropriate for this video. But if you have just like 12 grasshoppers and you have 1 billion ants, they can kill them, but they don't know if they just knew. Okay, so I'll have to switch gears on that. I'll go back to he was also unhappy with DeSoto because he felt like he was in on it. But DeSoto let him know that he had no intention of leading them in there to start anything except to apologize for their past behavior, which was egregious. And so he told Pakaha, he said, hey, I tell you what, I will escort you into Casqui and you can do what you want. You can wipe them all out because you're right. I've been both places. You've got the numbers. I'm mad at them. I'm going to help you. Okay, so they start the march toward Casqui. Casqui, which has been impenetrable for generations. It has never, ever been assailed. Here they go. They get inside, and when they get to the village, before they can really see it, they hear it. They hear some kind of wailing and singing, and lamenting is how it's described in the Chronicles. Thousands of people. Casqui had called in everyone from all the neighboring villages, and not warriors, but women, children, regular, elderly people, just your regular populace, and they were all singing some type of song, a mournful song. And Casqui was on top of the mountain. He was addressing his entire people with the river to his back, saying, "Don't we all fall short of the glory of God? I am just a man. I messed up. Don't we all sin? I meant to go apologize. It went wrong. It went bad. But I've apologized to Jesus. He has forgiven me and washed me clean." Isn't that how that works? DeSoto. And DeSoto looks at Pakaha and goes, "Well, yeah, that's how that works. So you can't attack him anymore because Jesus said it's okay. He's forgiven him of it." And Pakaha is furious. He is like, "I cannot believe this repeated insulting behavior." So things are very, very tense. And DeSoto, not knowing what else to do, says, "How about this? We're going to have a dinner. Me, you, Casqui, we're going to sit down. We're going to figure it all out." Okay, Pakaha says, so they do. They sit down at this table. Pakaha to his right because he has a better lineage. We don't really know the ins and outs of that, but that's just what is said in the Chronicles. And Casqui on the left, they talk about how they're going to make friends and how they're going to live together. DeSoto is looking at this and he realizes the entire time this is never going to happen. This is a very bad and volatile situation. And so even though the dinner is set out for that purpose, DeSoto realizes that his time here is gone, that one or both sides are going to kill him and all of his men in the night, if not earlier. And so as soon as the dinner was over, DeSoto excuses himself, meets with all of his generals, and is like, "We got to go." And they took off running out of Parkin, never to return. They spent more time in northeastern Arkansas than any other one spot the entire 4 years of the DeSoto expedition. So a lot of people find that very interesting. What I find interesting about it is the rich civilizations that they found around the rivers here, which differed from those east of us because the agriculture was just crazy. The first time that pecans were ever seen in the southeast were not in Georgia, like they like to claim, but DeSoto writes about them being in Arkansas on the St. Francis River. They also write about just the abundant wildlife, and even though it's a drought, they are blown away by the resources here, and it just makes a crazy, crazy impression on them. Also, even though these areas are much, much more warlike than they were eastern of us, the eastern U.S., DeSoto realized he had a lot more to learn from Casqui in particular, but these tribes, not only on their way of life and how to live here agriculturally, resources, other things, but just he looked at him not quite as an equal, but definitely as a comrade. It's a very interesting relationship between the two. And so he was here from about a month, from about June 8th until July 5th, and then they headed down south. Now, they meandered around in Arkansas looking for different things. Indian tribes that didn't want to mess with them would say, "Oh, I heard gold was over there away from us. You should go that way." And then other Indian tribes that hadn't heard about them that were interested in, this big red-headed freak of a man that had shiny things and horses would oftentimes come to regret their decision of making friends with him. But he meandered along and became ill somewhere down in South Arkansas around Lake Chico, and that area is an oxbow lake, which used to be an old channel of the Mississippi River. There were tribes in the area. They realized DeSoto was sick. They kept saying, "We want to speak with your king." And the people kept saying, "Oh, well, he's doing something right now. He's busy." Really, he was in the sick bed and almost dying. So they would come back the next day. They would say, "Oh, you just missed him. He left to go make some biscuits or something." This went on for several days, and then all of a sudden DeSoto died. Well, what they had told the Indians that were there, who were very suspicious of them anyway, is that it does you no good to kill us because he's a god. And you can't kill gods. And even if you were to kill me, my God can bring me back. So there's really no point in you killing us at all. And the Indians were kind of suspicious of this, but they didn't know for sure because these horses and metal and weird things, that could be from a god. So they were looking at them kind of with a side eye, trying to figure it out. But all of a sudden they couldn't see this god. They couldn't talk to this god because he had died. His men were in a total panic because they were like, "Oh no, we've been telling him he's a god and he can't die. He died. They're going to come in. They're going to kill all of us. So what do we do? What did they do? They wrapped him in some heavy things, chainmail, other things like that. They dumped him into Lake Chico, sunk him to the bottom, and then they took off again, heading for Texas. So this vast contingency of 600 men at the start, 611, I believe. They ended up being just a little over 300 in 4 years. The Southeast was not kind to them, but their infamous voyage through all of the Southeast, and in particular on the Mississippi and St. Francis rivers in eastern Arkansas, are something that almost 500 years later still have historians talking and give us a wonderful glimpse into prehistoric and proto-historic life here in the North American Southeast.